And so we're going to get started first with Gil Nelson, who's the director of iDig Bio, and then Dave Blackburn from the Florida Museum will follow Gil. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here.
Thank you very much, Jill. So I am excited beyond belief about this workshop and the opportunities that I think we have in front of us. I remember 14 years ago, 13 years ago, whenever this whole APC digitization effort was launched, we were very proud to be taking 2D images and seeing people take 2D images. And we were very proud to see those images get better and better. But I really think where we have to go in digitization of collections is in other types of media and other types of imaging and recording the information. I remember going to visit Mike Webster up at Cornell, and they started their project and didn't know if it was going to get funded because it seemed to be out of scope, out of line with what folks were doing, but they did get funded. I remember being in a meeting with Dave Blackburn where they basically took over the workshop at the end, and we came out with a proposal for overt. So I think all of these imaging modalities are fantastic for us. I think it helps us integrate our data. I think it helps us help the community understand what biodiversity collections are all about, what museum collections are all about. And I think this workshop is really sort of the launching point, as I see it, for bringing a lot of this together and making these types of images and types of media that are available out of collections more current and more available to everybody. And maybe most important, how do we encourage others outside of this room who are not experimenting with photogrammetry and all sorts of 3D and CT types imaging? How do we encourage folks outside of this room to take that up for their collections and not see it? I remember when we were in the workshop that Dave took over. Dave, I hate to say it that way, I didn't mean you were rude, but you did sort of take it over. I mean, the second half of the workshop became David. But the bottom line is, you know, how do we, I remember sitting in that room and folks saying, can we do this? This is very expensive. How do we do CT? I mean, CT costs a lot of money, So we began to look around the room, and there were about 25, 30 of us there. And we identified 8 CT machines out of the 25 or 30 people that were in that room. And then we began to realize maybe it wasn't so out of bounds to do a CT type of workshop and to really begin moving that direction. So very proud that that happened. And I think we've got, this is a catapult for us. So I'm very, very glad to be here, very happy, delighted, and want to really hear what you guys have to say. And let's see how we can move this forward in the community. So thank you very much.
I'm just talking. That's it. They're just going to be now.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Just making sure. I don't normally do this, but this is how I wrote my notes. All right, where moves the camera here? Yes.
I know it's a little awkward.
That's fine. Start. All right, cool. It's nice to see so many of you, John. It's been like years. So good morning. I'm happy to begin with a few comments. That my intention really is to inspire you as you think about today and as you get together in breakout groups tomorrow. So today you're going to see a lot of fantastic images, but not in my talk. I don't have any slides, and that is completely intentional. So before diving into methods, I wanted you to take a step back with me and think about why we're doing what we're doing. So you're going to hear from leading experts about advances in creating new media to see the outside and the inside of animals, both alive and dead, both from the past and the present, as well as, thinking about imaging the places those organisms are from as well. You also hear about these cutting edge techniques like some that Arthur is leading to make those images and data useful in research and education outreach. But here's what I want you to remember most. When we do this work as part of the Natural History Museum community, we don't do this to create images and data for their own sake, right? We do this because we're intending to serve some purpose, or more specifically, someone. And though today will be about creating images, I hope that you don't lose sight of the fact that there are people who we intend to see and to use these images. And those are the people that we serve through our work. So many of you know that the Open Vertebrate or OVERT project recently concluded just a few weeks ago. We published our sort of culminating paper in bioscience detailing the project. And so if you're interested in that project and don't already somehow know about it, please check it out. That is the culmination of work across 25 institutions across 6 and more years, involving more than 250 different individuals that helped with some component of that project. So it's really a community effort. If you read it, you will see that the first paragraph says nothing about CT scanning or imaging or digitization. The first paragraph begins with this bold claim. The physical specimens and objects in natural history museums require people to give them meaning. So what I've learned most from leading OVERT in collaboration with many of you that are already here today is that the most interesting part of the work really hasn't been the images, it has been the people. And there are people searching for our data. There are people who are sending these things on loan, generating data, making images, sharing them online, using them in their work. There are people that are using them in research, but using them also in classrooms for home 3D printing projects and more. It's also the people who have given us feedback about how valuable all of this has been. At the very beginning, in this workshop, I guess I took over, there was skepticism that anybody would even want this sophisticated of data. Like, is this just overkill? People really could just use 2D images. Do we really need all this more data? And it's really from the people using these data that have shown that, in fact, yes, there's a market for this. There's real value that people ascribe to having access to these type of data. So to me, one of the most remarkable parts of OVERT, and by extension also Morphosource and others, is that we're now better able to see the who associated with parts of our data. Which institutions and individuals generated these data and shared these data, manage these data, download and use these data. There's actually people and even names associated with all those pieces, right? And I think if you look back to a flat data record 10 years ago, there's not really that many individuals in that data record, right? And now we actually can keep track of that. So the numbers from the OVERT project are fun to give, so I'll just give them now. So we scanned more than 13,000 specimens together that represent about 6,500 genera. That's about 2/3 of all living vertebrate diversity. Genus diversity. Those are represented now by about 30,000 media files on Morphosource, and that have been downloaded at least 100,000 times. They've also been viewed well more than 1 million times. We have a hard time keeping track of like views and who those people are, but we know that they're getting viewed a lot. And you can, quote, use those data just by viewing them. So with a new viewer that was embedded into the Morphosource website, there's a lot of science that can be done straight off looking at the data online, right? So those views are important. The goal of any TCN, like OVERT, was to generate data that was for research. And so no surprise, that's happened. So there's been more than 200 publications that have used OVERT data. I stopped counting like almost a year ago, so hopefully it's much more than that. And those have had nearly 700 individual authors on those papers, right? So there's a lot of people out there using these data. It's difficult to know how many people are viewing the data online, but there's at least 4,000 different individuals that have downloaded those data for their research, their classrooms, their art projects, or their home 3D printing projects, right? So it's clearly reached a lot of people. So as you're thinking today about imaging, I want you to think too about the people connected to it. You know, it's easy to imagine a generic researcher who will want to use these data and images in their future. And a lot of digitization is kind of like that, right? We're doing it, we're imagining someone's going to want it in the future. But I find it helpful to actually think about specific individuals and who that person might be and what they might want. And while we're not yet at a point where we can probably have these detailed 3D data for everything, and we probably never will, you know, by not imaging everything, it means we have to make choices, right? We have to decide what we're going to image. And I think thinking about the people we want to reach is helpful for thinking about the choices we make while we're doing imaging and digitization. So, you know, how will a fifth grader find and use these data? What might she want to discover? You know, how will a high school environmental science teacher find and use these data with their students? And what do they need to know in order to do that, right? What type of things are going to be interesting to a digital artist in Australia or a sculptor in Korea? Those are people who actually use our OVERT data right now. Ed and I always talk about what's going to be the 1 million download specimen. You know, can we predict what that's going to be? Can we make that happen? That really depends on what people want. So we can't be all things to all people, but I find it really useful to imagine at least a few people that help guide what we choose to image, how we choose to image it, how we choose to share it. I've been asked many times what Overt Part 2 is. To me, that is the Nocturne project that Ed is going to talk about later today. So we already know pretty well as a group how to make data, how to make images. But the next piece is actually, I was really happy to hear you say that, Jill. And the next piece really is the community of people, you know, that we want to bring into the fold and how we have them work with us. So, you know, it's enticing to think that a greater diversity of people will find and use our specimens because they're online. But I don't think it's sufficient to just put things online and hope. I think we actually have to put more skin in the game as a community to identify, you know, who those people are, what are their obstacles, what do they need to know